Hello and welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host Sharmeen Ali. India has now entered into a second week of protest after passing the controversial Citizens Amendment Act, and the talk of the National Register of Citizens has caused an uproar amongst communities, Hindus, Muslims alike, all across the country in different cities. And just over the weekend, we saw a lot of unrest in Uttar Pradesh, and there were a lot of other cities as well where we saw unrest. And apparently, Prime Minister Modi at a rally addressed all of this, and he said that there's nothing to fear, that Muslims are not being discriminated. Yet the whole country seems to be thinking very differently. There were 25 deaths that have taken place now, up until now, all across India due to these protests and the handling of by the police in India. And the internet is blocked in many of the cities. There's a state of emergency. 7,500 people have been detained, and just in UP alone over the weekend, 17 more people were killed and 500 were injured. So we're going to be talking about this in our program today. And in a new development in Afghanistan, a very late but welcome development, that finally a president has, winner has been announced in the presidential elections. And President Ashraf Ghani is going to, has won a majority of about 50.64%, and his rival Abdullah has got 39.52%. So we'll talk about that because there's still allegations of corruption from the other side, and the results are still preliminary and need to be confirmed. So we're going to discuss that with our guests in the studio, and also some very welcome news for Pakistan. Our famous Urdu poet Amjad Islam Amjad has gotten an award in Turkey. It's the highest literary cultural award, and it was given to him by President Erdogan, and it's a huge honor for Pakistan and for Urdu literature. And Mr. Amjad Islam Amjad is a senior poet in Pakistan, and he's a playwright. He's written TV dramas, and he's known as one of our best. So that's some really welcome news. And now I'd like to welcome the guests I have with me in my studio today. We have with us Ambassador Ali Sarwar Naqvi, who is a frequent participant on our programs. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us today. First, we're going to talk about what's happening in India right now. Now, over the weekend, there were protests in Hyderabad, Jaipur, Mumbai, and they've been in Delhi, all over the country in the past week or more. So let's have a look at that, and then we'll discuss with our guests.
Situation is getting critical with each passing day in India after the negation of controversial Citizenship Amendment Act incited minorities to violence. Uttar Pradesh is the center of the protest. The local police claim that death toll in cab-related protests has now reached 18 in the state. Police said at least 18 people, including an 8-year-old boy, have lost their lives so far. India Today has reported that a total of 5,400 people have been taken under custody till now, and around 705 people have been sent to jail. The Modi government is also expected to invoke the National Security Act against 250 agitators. 60 FIRs have also been registered over various charges, including rioting. The Indian police is also keeping strict surveillance over social media, where more than 13,000 such social media accounts claim to be spreading incendiary content, having been identified by the administration so far. More than 100 people have been arrested for inciting violence through social media platforms. Internet services are blocked in 21 districts of the state. After a gap of 4 days, the Aligarh Muslim University campus again witnessed protests, with hundreds of non-teaching staff joining hands with the Teachers Association to oppose the cab and a police auction against students. All these acts show that the Modi government, despite all its efforts, has failed to convince even the majority Hindus about his designs. Sane voices in India have questioned the future of minorities in India and have expressed their anger over the current state of affairs.
The BJP government has shown utter disregard for people's voices and chosen to use brute force to suppress dissent. This is unacceptable in a democracy.
So yes, this is what we're seeing happening all over India right now. So, sir, I'd like to ask you now. Okay, we're seeing the state of affairs over the last 2 weeks in India. It's very sad to see people going through what they're going, especially the students. And in this situation, okay, there's the majority of the protests obviously are against the Citizenship Amendment Act and the National Register of Citizens, yet there was one in favor of the act. So there are different, angles, but majority of the people are protesting against it. And there are also stories coming out about the police and what they've had to deal with. However, we're seeing, students with their hands and feet broken and a lot of use of force and the use of wooden sticks, etc., tear gas firing. A lot of people have been shot as well. And at the same time, Prime Minister Modi seems in his statements to be kind of in denial of what this is causing and what this is, that no, it's not discriminatory. So your views on this, sir?
You see, Sharmeen, this is the age of information. Now, in this 21st century, we are living in the age of information, which means what? It means that any movement on the street of the ordinary people will not be cannot be suppressed by the government. This was seen, in a whole lot of places in Europe, in Latin America. There were demonstrations in Paris. There were demonstrations in the East European countries, in Hungary, and this is widespread. So here, when the BJP government tries to enact a law which is basically to redefine the characteristic of a citizen, redefine the term citizenship in a manner in which it is discriminatory, and it favors some and does not favor the others. Obviously, there is a groundswell of opposition, and this opposition cannot be contained and stopped, nor can the information about this be held back.
Exactly.
So this is happening all over India, all the major cities. You mentioned Delhi and Mumbai, and then there is Kolkata, and there is all the half a dozen other major cities in India, where in Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra, everywhere. So the outrage of the common man, though this bill is discriminatory basically against Muslims, but the outrage is evidence of the fact that the Indian people do not believe in this.
Exactly.
They want the Hindus and the Muslims and the Christians.
That idea of India being a secular democracy
Yes.
with equal rights for all, that's what it seems like. Indians, that's what they all want.
Yes.
And they're not being given that anymore. It's being taken away, and it's becoming sort of a Hindu majority state,
Yes.
a Hindu Rashtra, which a lot of people are denying that these laws have nothing to do with a Hindu Rashtra, but this is exactly what it seems as if, right?
That's right. You listen to the speeches of Shashi Tharoor, who has been a veteran MP and has been a writer and has been a UN official, a very senior man, a very accomplished man, who has made a number of his speeches that the very character of the Indian state is being altered. The Rashtra, what you talked about, the ascendancy of a Hindu Rashtra and the marginalization or sidelining of the secular India that had been the shape and form of the Indian state so far till Modi came to power, is a transformation which is disliked, intensely disliked by the common people.
Right. So, Prime Minister Modi, now he also said in this rally in New Delhi that he was attending, he said that Muslims had nothing to worry about, and he said that there are also no detention centers in India, and there's no citizenship register for India. Now, at the same time, his Home Minister Amit Shah has repeatedly said that there will be a national register of citizens, and that 1.9 million people have to prove before that they were residents in India before 1971,
Yeah.
and they have to provide the papers. Now, obviously, that excludes now Hindus, because under the Citizenship Amendment Act, the Hindus will be absorbed in the country. It only leaves out the Muslims. So that's what all this noise is about. But as far as the detention centers is concerned, Assam already has 6 detention centers with 1,000 people. They're building 11 more. And then also the Home Ministry gave out in 2009, this year, model detention manual for major entry points in the different states in India. And yet the Prime Minister is denying in a rally that there's no detention centers in India, and whether there maybe also that there won't be any, but by 2024 they're supposed to put everybody into the National Register of Citizens is supposed to be all over the country implemented.
Yeah.
And yet he's saying at rallies there's no such thing.
Well, this is the history of all repressive states, that they are always in denial of opposition. I mean, this is true of the old communist regimes. This is true of many rightist governments, be it Bolivia, be it Portugal, be it Spain. They have been all in denial of opposition.
Right. And also Prime Minister Modi blamed the Congress party for condoning the violence and encouraging it and things like that.
But you see, he has also been in denial of the uprising in Kashmir and the Kashmiri people, the repression against the Kashmiri people. He says that they are okay, they have access to information, and they have free movement for limited periods of time. He has not said the curfew has been lifted, which he can't, but he has said that the entire strict regime that had been imposed has been relaxed. But that's not correct. That's not correct. And that is witnessed by the international media as well, by the international social media, press, etc. Because there are a series of articles in the New York Times, Washington Post, in London Times, in Guardian, everywhere. Now, the Modi government will have to come to terms with this reality that there is widespread opposition to what they have done, and that this Citizenship Amendment Act will have to be looked at by them, because if it stays as it is, then the mass protests are not going to end suddenly. I mean, they have taken and you have seen in the case of Hong Kong or in the case of Paris that they have gone on for weeks and weeks and weeks. But ultimately, it is possible that the weight of the state may suppress it.
Okay, because like we've seen in Indian occupied Kashmir, there's a curfew and then there's an internet blackout. You're seeing that now being repeated in other parts of India as well, curfews and internet shutdown in large parts of Uttar Pradesh, which we saw over the weekend, and universities being shut down so that students can't come out and all. How far does that work with a billion or plus people? How far is that going to work? Is the Indian might and force of their security forces strong enough to maintain that order?
When the people rise, no matter how strong the security forces may be, no matter how strong the police may be, but the people can prevail despite any kind of restriction or pressure. And you see the effect. What will be the effect? He will have to look at that, and that is on the economy, because normal life will be disrupted, and economic activity will be affected negatively, and industrial production will be affected. Workers are out on the streets.
And they're very heavily coveted sort of tourism industry is going to completely downhill. We have online with us right now Mr. Rauf Hassan, who's a senior analyst. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us online.
Sure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
And I would like to now bring to you the same questions I was speaking with our guest in the studio. Ambassador Ali Sarwar Naqvi is with us in the studio. I would like to ask you this now. The situation that we saw in Indian occupied Kashmir, where there was a curfew and a lockdown, an internet blackout, then there was, everything was shut down sort of. And now, at that time, we saw a sort of deafening silence all over India. And then following that, we saw the Ayodhya verdict being announced. Even that had a very muted response all over India, mostly from the Muslim community and a little bit from the rest of Indians. And now suddenly with the Citizenship Amendment Act and the National Register of Citizens, the whole country sort of gone up in flames. So sir, why the late reaction now? And now that, the Indian citizens are also seeing that the curfew and internet blackout is being imposed in other parts of the country, how do you think that the people are going to respond to this?
First, I don't quite see this as a late response. What I'm seeing in India at this moment in time is a quintessential reflection of what democracy is all about. When it was Kashmir, it was affecting a certain number of people and one state. This Citizenship Act basically affects the whole of India. So that is the principal difference, between the two. Ayodhya also was an ongoing fight. It had been going on for about 20 years, and I think virtually everybody had expected the kind of result that ultimately came out of the Indian Supreme Court. But this is something which impacts every single individual of India. This is qualitatively different, from what other things have happened in India in the last 4 to 5 months' time. So I think the surprising is. Even I could not imagine that there would be such unanimous upsurge of emotion, in India. Because, but then it is understandable because it impacts every individual's life. Here, basically, sword hangs over the heads of the Muslims, but it is also going to impact other religions of India because the Muslims are about 200 million in number in India, and in certain states they are in majority. So they have a definitive voice there. And over a period of time, I think, because of the fact that democracy has been prospering in India in the last 72 years, there is a level of homogeneity which has developed among various communities of the country. So, this basically is something, which is, as I said, which is qualitatively different from the other happenings in India. So it's good to see it happen like that, because democracy is all about taking something forward, irrespective of divisions, be it religious, be it ethnic, be it sectarian, be it other divisions in the society. So we're seeing what we're seeing in India is a quintessential demonstration of that ethos, of that sentiment within the people of a democratic country. And I think it's going to go forward because the reports which I have heard today is that it has spread further. It has spread further in India. So it's not dying out as possibly Prime Minister Modi would have wanted it to. It is spreading further, and I hope that it leads to a deeper realization within the Indian people that the Kashmiris are suffering too, that the Ayodhya decision was not a just decision also. It may happen. It actually can happen. Now that people have, kind of risen in defiance of the Indian government's decision, I think, a deeper realization may sink in, that, there are other things, which have gone wrong in India also. So maybe, in times to come, we would see that, other things are also being focused upon. And, maybe there's, we're able to find a way forward in a, in a positive manner.
Also, now this is one question that I've heard a lot of anchors asking the guests that these measures that have been taking, the revocation of Article 317, 35A and the Citizenship Amendment Act, everything was forewarned by. Prime Minister Modi repeatedly said these things during the elections. It was part of his manifesto. Yet at that time, he won by this overwhelming majority. And now there's this reaction when he's actually implementing it. And there are a number of the Indian citizens on social media who have tweeted that I regret voting for BJP. I wanted to vote for reforms, etc. And I was not expecting this. But this was very clear from the outset. So what is your view on this, sir?
No, see, obviously, Prime Minister Modi got a thumping majority this time, much bigger than the first time that he won the elections in India 5.5 years ago. This was principally because of his economic policies, which unfortunately are not working as well as as he expected them or people thought they would work. In fact, because there has been a certain decline in the economic development of India in the last 5 years or so. Yet, what he did was that for the first time he brought Hindutva into play in Indian politics, and that was different. That was so different from many things which had been practiced before. In spite of the fact that we had a BJP government in India before that under Mr. Vajpayee, he was a statesman, and in fact he's the one who extended a hand of friendship to Pakistan. You remember his visit to Pakistan, to Lahore. But this BJP government has one additional factor to it. That is the RSS, Rashtriya Sevak Sangh, basically, which is the Hindutva ideology. And another thing which is different between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Vajpayee is that Prime Minister Modi is a fanatic member of RSS. So this Hindutva factor, which has come center stage in India in the last 5.5 years, is what has brought about the change. So, it kind of virtually divided the Indian society among Hindus and non-Hindus. And I think this reaction is also because of that. That even the Hindus who had voted for Vajpayee, who had voted for Prime Minister Modi, they're gradually realizing that what have we done? We have not reaped the benefits of the economic promises made by Prime Minister Modi, and yet we are seeing a division within the Indian society. And if a society is divided, like we've experienced in
Pakistan, for joining us online. Thank you for your input. And sir, now I'd like to ask you the final question, sort of, because we're going to wind up this segment shortly, that in your opinion, what do you foresee happening as an end result of this? Now, Rauf Asab said that the protests are spreading right now still.
Yeah.
We don't see an end to this. And now the protests are building upon the protests, meaning that first it was against the Citizenship Amendment Act, then it started against the police brutality, the protests against that going on, and the crackdown and the heavy-handedness. So it just seems to be kind of spiraling out of control.
Yes.
What's the end result?
It's a kind of rolling stone or a snowball effect. When it gathers more substance and more volume, it becomes a very big boulder, which is difficult to stop. Now, here the uprising is widespread, right? And then they will get their own heroes, because there will be unfortunate deaths, and these deaths, these people who will die will be heroes for the opposition, for the people who are protesting. So, and this will go on for some weeks or months, because that's what we have seen is happening now in many countries of the world. And
in Lebanon, the Prime Minister resigned.
Prime
Is there a chance of that happening?
No, Lebanon is a different situation. There are several factions in the state of Lebanon which are at loggerheads with each other, and that's very complicated. But here there is more homogeneity in the electorate, because as was pointed out, he won a thumping majority. So I think it will be a more indirect thing. Instead of a resignation, which might happen, I mean, I won't rule it out, but I think more likely is that it will have an impact on the economy, and the economy is already very fragile, because the Economist in the last 2 weeks publications have pointed out the rot. One article says the rot inside the Indian economy. It's rotting from inside. So,
what about what some people say, there's going to be another partition of India and that's going to break up? In your opinion, do you think that will happen?
In the long term, it's possible that India breaks up. But I think that will take quite a lot of time. And at the moment, if the economy is impacted badly, then I think the BJP will start losing states. Like today, I saw the news that in Jharkhand state, the BJP is losing the state elections.
Okay.
So the state elections keep going on, and I think they will start losing their support.
So it will affect their vote bank. Okay, we'll come back and we'll discuss further after the break. Please stay with us, and we'll continue with our program after the break. Welcome back. Now, in this part of our program, we're going to be talking about President Ashraf Ghani, who's won his second term in the preliminary election, in the preliminary vote count from the September 28th Afghanistan elections. He won by a slim majority of votes, and according to these results, which were announced on Sunday, he won by a 50.64% majority vote, and his opponent, Dr. Abdullah, won. He got 39.52% of the vote. So it's an apparent win for President Ashraf Ghani, and his opponent is again questioning the authenticity of these results and whether there was tampering and fraud, which has happened in the previous Afghan election, as we saw in 2014, that a unity government had to be formed between the two rivals. So now we're going to talk about this topic now. So, sir, the Afghan election results, now we're seeing this, it's a slim majority, and it's still not confirmed at the moment. What are your views on this as far as bringing about greater stability for Pakistan, for Afghanistan is concerned?
For Ashraf Ghani, it is better a better result than last time, and of course there are questions being raised, especially by the Abdullah camp, but I think there is a sizable difference between the substantial difference between the two. If he is in 39% something and Ghani is 50% plus, then Ghani decidedly is has a much bigger share of the electoral pie. So I think he will be confirmed. These objections, etc., will be dealt with by the constitutional court or constitutional commission that they have, and I think there might be some recount, which often happens.
Right. So, in these last elections, there was already a low voter turnout. There was 9.7 million registered voters and a low turnout. And now these allegations of fraud. And on top of that, there was a large number of attacks that happened on election day. 85 civilians were killed on election day alone, and 370 were injured also. And then there were again allegations of rigging, and those were attacks by the Taliban. So in your opinion now, with all of this uncertainty and sort of does it create stability in any way, or what do you foresee going forward?
The stability of Afghanistan depends on a whole range of factors, not only the elections. The elections should have been a little more decisive in the first place. But secondly, there is this question of the withdrawal of the foreign troops and consequent reduction in the assistance and the flow of money to Afghanistan from outside donors, which will affect the functioning of the government. Right. So that and then the third element of this, the third important factor is the Taliban. The Taliban are going to continue to be on the rampage and carrying out terrorist attacks.
So a lot still remains uncertain. Now we have online with us Mr. Hassan Khan, who's a senior analyst and he's an expert on Afghanistan affairs. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us online.
Thank you very much.
So, sir, in your opinion now, with the election results showing that President Ashraf Ghani is in the lead and he's probably going to have a second term as president, in light of the current peace talks going on between the United States and the Taliban, with this setup, what do you see as a future scenario?
Look, I think still Dr. Ashraf Ghani still have the same problem, which is the legitimacy of the government. First, when this election was announced, mostly the Afghan leadership was in favor of postponing the same. And Taliban also announced that they are not going to accept this election. One. Two, if we look at the voting turnout, it is too less. Out of the Afghanistan total population is almost 3 crore 50 lakh, and 33 plus million is total population. 90 million, 9 crore are the total the registered voters number. while the total number of vote cast is just 1.8 million. So it's too minimum. While Dr. Ashraf Ghani lead is very marginal. He has got 50.64%, while Dr. Abdullah is 39.52%. So he got the total number of votes Dr. Ashraf Ghani got is 933,000, and 9 lakh 33,000 plus. While Dr. Abdullah is 7 lakh 7 lakh plus. So it means that the voting turnout is very much is too minimum, and second, the ratio of the vote cost or the vote obtained by Dr. Ashraf Ghani is also not that promising. And third is the elections are still, I think, this controversial. There were two main controversies. One was the biometric and the non-biometric vote. It was decided by the Election Commission of Afghanistan that only biometric vote will be counted. But later on, almost 300,000 non-biometric vote are also they were polled, which Dr. Abdullah objected over it. Dr. Abdullah and the other candidate objected over it, and almost seven provinces, we call it. The voting counting is still controversial in the 7 provinces. So I think it's too difficult for Dr. Ashraf Ghani to claim legitimacy, and I don't know how the international community will react or will accept, because Dr. Abdullah and the rest of the candidates, they have announced that they are not going to accept the result, they are not going to accept the government. So I believe that that question of legitimacy, which the Afghan government or the Afghanistan was facing for more than a year when Taliban were engaged in talks with the U.S., so that question of legitimacy is still there. And I personally believe that Taliban are not going to accept this government. And the previous government, the unity government, was comparatively better representative of the Afghan people, because then, if you go by the 2014 election, so in the first round, Dr. Ghani got 33%, while Dr. Abdullah got 45%. But in the second round, Dr. Ghani got 55 and Dr. Abdullah 47. So there was a government of the unity government. When both joined together, Dr. Ghani became the president and Dr. Abdullah became the chief executive. So to me, I think that was much better, the representative of the Afghan people. But this time, so many questions on its legitimacy. So I think it's still going to be a big question whether, personally, I don't believe that Taliban are going to accept it. And generally, if you look at the landscape, it's still, I think, that question of legitimacy is still there.
Now, with the ongoing peace talks between the United States and the Taliban, they're currently halted. What do you see as the future of these peace talks? What sort of now, they were abruptly stopped in September when President Donald Trump tweeted that he's stopping the peace talks. Now it's started again. So is there going to be a new kind of peace agreement, and is there a greater chance for this new president, the new government, to be involved in these?
I think that the real devils lie in the talks when Afghans start talks with the Afghans. I think as this process between the U.S. and the Taliban, the U.S. is too much anxious. I think it's especially the current administration, the President Trump administration. They from the day first they announced that they are going to withdraw from Afghanistan and hand over it. What is there? They are not supposed to police or the such like countries. So I think the U.S. itself is in hurry, and they want to have a certain type of a patch up where they tell their people that, look, we have make it up, and now the international forces will be out of Afghanistan. But I think so far, that this part of the talks was comparatively more simple and straight, because the Taliban and the U.S. forces are the U.S. government, they are talking to each other, and only there are 2 points that Afghan soil will not be used for terrorist activities, and the U.S. forces will withdraw from Afghanistan. So simple 2 points, and now they are stuck over the points that whether the Taliban have to announce a ceasefire, They have to reduce the level of violence, etc. They have to accept the Afghan government in the talks. So now these are the three. But once the process starts between the Afghans, when the Afghans sit together with the Afghans, so I think that will be there, the real devil will lie there. When you go for detail, that how Taliban will be engaged in the government, what type of share will be, how they will be accommodated, where and when they will be adjusted, etc. What will be the construction of the Afghan National Army, what will be the format of the Afghan National Police Force, and what type of changes will be affected in the Afghan National Constitution. So I think for me, I'm not that much, I think, if I say, not that much optimistic that in near future we are going to have a peace process, a proper peace framework for Afghanistan.
So much, Mr. Hassan Khan, for joining us online. So, Ambassadors, have you heard what Mr. Hassan Khan said? He's an expert on Afghan affairs. The chances for intra-Afghan dialogue, which everybody, Prime Minister Imran Khan has been talking about and encouraging and trying for, and which is, you know, meant to be part of this whole the peace talks eventually after the peace agreement is reached. What is the chance of that actually taking place, and all these other major issues that are going to be left over afterwards? What's going to happen with those?
The key question, Sharmeen, for me, as I see it, is a question of legitimacy, because the legitimacy of the election process is being brought into question, and Abdullah is challenging it and all that, and the turnout was very low. So legitimacy comes from turnout, from the participation of the people. And if the people only out of 9 million, only 1 million plus have voted, then that's very small percentage. Secondly, the Taliban are not going to accept the legitimacy of the Afghan government. That's the key problem in the US Taliban talks. So there are, this is going to be, it's a multifaceted issue of legitimacy, both inside and outside. And the Taliban are going to exploit it, because they are, after all, vying for power. It's the struggle for power. So all this together, your original question about the stability of Afghanistan, I think the stability is very much in question.
Right, because the stability of Afghanistan really impacts the stability of Pakistan as well, because you have all this cross-border movement and all the threats of terrorism and all also, you know, going across the border. So now if the outcome is not still not confirmed and the reviewed results still show less than, suppose they end up showing less than 50% for President Ghani, a second round of elections may be possible. That's also a possibility, right? So if there's a lot of, there's no unifying leader, is there a chance of Afghanistan sort of again being divided amongst tribal and ethnic lines?
Well, sliding into anarchy, actually. And that would be very disastrous. It will be very serious, and it will have its spillover into Pakistan. So I think we are looking at a very murky situation, and we you know, we have to see how things turn out. Maybe the Americans will try to exercise to give more legitimacy to the Afghan government.
Like they stepped in the last elections, right? Thank you so much, Ambassador Ali Sarwar Naqvi, for joining us again. Indeed, a lot rests on these election results in Afghanistan. And now moving on to one of our very famous poets, Mr. Amjad Islam. Amjad has gotten the highest award in the literature and culture in Turkey. And it's a very proud moment for Pakistan and, you know, as well as for Urdu literature. And this is a very well-known playwright, and he's written television dramas as well. He's one of our best. So let's have a look at what he's achieved.
Amjad Islam Amjad is an Urdu poet, drama writer and lyricist from Pakistan. The author of more than 40 books in a career spanning 50 years, he has received many awards for his literary work and screenplays for television, including the Pride of Performance and the Sitara Imtiaz. He has written many columns, critical articles and essays, while his main focus has remained writing nazms, which are a type of Urdu poetry. Amongst the most notable dramas are Waris, Dehleez, Samandar, Raat, Waqt and Apne Log. Amjad Islam Amjad received the prestigious Najib Fazil International Culture and Art Award at a ceremony in Istanbul. He was the only foreign recipient of this award in 2019. The ceremony is organized to honor the cultural and literary heritage of Turkish poet Necip Fazıl. Congratulating Amjad, Pakistan's ambassador to Turkey, Cyrus Kazi, stated that the award is an acknowledgement of Amjad's outstanding contributions to literature.
Indeed, it's a very proud moment for Pakistan, and we all must pick up his books and read them. And also, you know, we're all familiar with all these wonderful, famous dramas that he's written. I mean, he's so senior and they've been around for such a long time. So we're very proud of this achievement of Mr. Amjad Islam Amjad. That's all the time we have for today's program. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Newsroom.